Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Marcia de la O is unable to be with us today. The wonderful poet Carol Moldaw will read first, and then I'll read. Carol Moldaw is the author of 7 poetry books and a novella. Her work has been published widely in journals including APR, the New York Review of Books, Subtropics, and the Yale Review, and translated into Chinese, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and Turkish. A volume of her selected poems, translated into Chinese, is forthcoming from Guangxi University Press, Beijing in 2025. Originally from Northern California, she lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and teaches privately. She'll be reading from her most recent book, Go Figure, 4-way book, September 2024, which has just been published. Here's a magnificent poet, Carol Moldaw.
Thank you so much, Harry. And I want to thank you for inviting me to read on your poetry hour today. I want to say I love knowing that everyone in this audience, and I can't see any of you, you've spent your career in creative work and in a variety of capacities. And I love both film and television, so consider it an honor to be here. And though film and TV are both collaborative media involving much money, and poetry is an intensely solitary art that famously costs little and brings in little, I think they have interesting things in common. Like a camera, a poem is infinitely mutable. It can give panoramic views, close-ups, different angles. It can create a factual or narrative document, a lyric vehicle, or an emotional instrument. It can use jump cuts and long and uninterrupted shots. I'm sure if I had more vocabulary, I'd find more comparisons. Anyway, I'm going to read from Go Figure, as Harry mentioned, that was just released. There are many figurations in the poems, both in the sense of figures in art, poetic images, and configurations of human relationships. I like the vernacular sense of the phrase as well, as I hope the poems draw the reader and listener to their own thoughts and conclusions. So, this is the first poem in the book, Visiting the River After Having Moved Away. The treads of my boot soles, hard pack block print ideograms in river mud. Which will outlast which? The melancholy of returning here, or the pattern made from it? My husband's also, I feel like it's an odd view of myself. My husband's also a poet, and there are some poems that I have that reflect, two poets living together. And this is one of them. It's called On Being Mused Upon. Reading his poems, you recognize yourself in intermittent, isolated images. Your scent, your nape, your hair, an arrangement of flowers you once placed at the center of a long table. It adds to evidence that you are being seen, which is not, you hope, the same as being watched, a thing you wouldn't want. Still, you wonder whether the piecemeal you and she resemble at all your version of who you are. You may be seen, but your nature is to feel disappearingly visible as vape smoke, as the scentless rings your daughter perfects, as she begins to separate her identity from you both, from how or how not she is seen. There's a lot of seen and being seen in this book. The next poem is called Go Figure. And in it, I was thinking a lot about being a woman and looking at and loving art often by men and the complications that entails as a woman artist. But the poem begins, it's easier to know this, with a description of Khajuraho, which is the temple in India. It's a World Heritage Site with the facade is all carved with erotic sculpture. Go figure. In her and her and her, I saw myself. In carved sandstone, a voluptuary, my neck coiled to face my back twisted to pinch and raise for inspection, a small patch of almost out of reach skin. One foot planted, the other on toe, my toes on a Laro nedge high up the temple's facade. I'm unfazed by gaze of mason, acolyte, or tourist. And in her, also slightly coiled, rising out of the bath under a painter's gaze, I saw myself stepping over the tub's rim, sideways into the easel like a towel. You call me by the painter's name, a Lautrec, a Degas. Myself in veined marble, my towel now draped like a veil, or etched in a notched crosshatch illusion of fishnets. Hewn in block, empaneled in canvas, versions sketched, filmed, celluloid, digitized. Countless iterations find me poised as if alone at the mirror, examining eye, lip, brow, brush and palette in hand. The mirror goes back to grit, a sand that can't reflect, but absorbs the noon sun I peer up into, as into a museum's directed and calculated light, as into a church's perpetual dusk, cinema's blackout velvet. This next poem is, it's called Painter and Model 1, because there is in the book a Painter and Model 2. But this one, it's written after Lucian Freud's painting, Painter and Model. And the model in the painting is Celia Paul, an artist and writer. And I was drawn to the painting because I'm an admirer of Celia Paul's work. Her first memoir, Self-Portrait, meant a lot to me while I was working on these poems. Painter and Model. Because she paints barefoot, she's barefoot in his painting of her painting. Well, not painting, but modeling for him as the painter she is, and gazing towards her ostensible model, splayed nude on a battered brown leather Chesterfield. Well, not gazing. Her eyes as he painted them are downcast, the lids closed. If they were open, it seems by the bowing of her head that she'd be looking at the model's outthrust knee. Though what the viewer notices first and foremost is what the paintbrush idling between her clasped hands is angled toward. The model's resting uncut cock. Both her inner and his outer gaze are ambiguous, distanced. His attending somewhere beyond the painting he's in, perhaps focused on the back of the canvas being painted as he lies there, or on the fanatical painter, not her standing at his side, who he did in fact model for, but the one outside the frame, who positioned, checked, repositioned them both on and on, just so, or beyond him, and in a reverie of the imagined future, unto us, our scrutiny. Akimbo, one knee rests on the couch's pock-marked back, while another extends over its edge, the weight of his heel on the floor, his curled toes pointing toward the same heap of squeezed out paint tubes and crisscrossing brushes that her right foot is on the periphery of, her toes pressing on a tube that's oozing olive green. To me, this, a bottom left center tangent made by the intersection of lines each set of toes invisibly extends, is the painting's not so secret heart. Her smock dress, used as her paint rag, is its own action painting. The cornered walls, a fresco's undercoat. let's see. This next poem, which there we go. It's another poem that stems from two poets cohabitating. Oh, look, you can see it's such a pretty cover. The painter is Cicely Brown. Anyway, raccoons. On my way to water the strawberries at dusk, I gardened in those days. I saw a raccoon clasping the outdoor spigot like a sailor's wheel, using both paws that seemed more and more like hands as it kept twisting until water gushed out of the copper nozzle and it drank. I hadn't thought of it in years, not even after I saw another raccoon, high-stepping the coyote fence midday with a limp vole overhanging its mouth. Such a singular sight. I had to tell you, and blurted it out as soon as I saw you, a piece of domestic gossip, like the first crocus or noisy neighbors. Common property, like so much in marriage. A small business, a friend called it, down to the cooked books. Only later, after I spotted the raccoon sauntering through a line in one of your poems, only after the pressure cooker of my displeasure caused you to recast your raccoon and vole as skunk and mole, did I flash on the one I'd seen decades before. Its lack of furtiveness, the air it had of being within its rights, the way it took its time to retrace its steps to turn the water off. Or did it amble on and let the water run? No copyright protects idle talk, you might have said. Or the imaginarium of marriage knows no bounds. Lessons. Taught as a girl to inquire after a man's day, to affirm with nod or smile what he says went right, to flutter the stray hand off shoulder or thigh, and emit a full-scale range of fluted laughter, to feign disbelief, inspire confidence. Taught not how to embellish, but to be myself embellishment, in attentiveness and inattention, assume the same wrapped mask. As Harry mentioned, I grew up in Northern California, and this is, I guess, a series of landscape quick close-ups, some of them of memories. Northern California. Bulbous ropes of kelp that tide stranded. Sandstone sea break cliffs, eucalyptus groves. A hammock strung between redwoods. Up scuffing dust with the pointy tips of my riding boots, walking down to the barn at camp, the Montecito Sequoia Camp for Girls. Lifting the canvas flap and leaning out of the top bunk in my flannel nightgown to whiff cold air and be dazed by stars. Shiny saw-toothed leaves of the live oaks scattered through hills tawny with foxtails. Camellia bushes, oleander, bougainvillea. A bluff of salt-pocked Monterey cypresses twisted in the same configuration, like 50s teens, the boys with wind-blown ducktail flat tops. No sooner had I let on to myself that this was my psyche's landscape than it burst into hellish, unquenchable flames. And this poem is called Night Piece. Disoriented after we moved, I'd stumble on the equally insomniac moon all hours of the night, rolling from window to window, inching north as it traveled west, and slowly deflating as if pinpricked by the burr of a star. No matter what shape it was in, directly overhead, the moon eluded me, until a skylight would narrowly capture its brilliance heading for the drive. From our new entry's glass panels, I'd watch my old pellucid friend glide across the canyon and gild the Jemez before it sank like a coin in a slot, leaving me to find my way by feel to my side of our newly unfamiliar bed. Let's see. This is a poem about motherhood. It's called Not a Clue. It's a villanelle, which is a repeating form, poetic form. I have years of clues and no clue about the seductive voice in your head telling you what not to do. Whether or not it's true, you said that voice was shed. I've years of clues and no clue. Motherhood daunting as voodoo. I'd need the skills of a Jedi to know what not to do. Or a saint, someone who knew how not to try to pry you out of bed. I've years of clues and no clue. Things revert to normal, as if on cue. I know I've been misguided, telling you what not to do, and zoned out on the bedspread, feel the nausea of it anew. I've years of clues and no clue what not to do. And this next poem combines two things, it kind of metaphorically. One is the image, some of you might know, of a jaguar in Mexican sculpture, which is usually shamanic. The shaman turns into a jaguar. And then this poem was written during the time when family separation at the border became widely known. And the poem tries to bring the two preoccupations together. Olmec. The bone-crushing pain of turning into a jaguar, palpable in the shaman's cleft head carved in basalt or jade, and his downturned, squared-off open mouth, lips stretched and dilated in birthing, in a scream. Try to imagine yourself crossing from one world of pain into another, the quiet needed to summon the fury needed to catapult you over. For the umpteenth time, until entranced, I trace a talismanic cascade of curlicues copied from an old book. Images smuggled out from the border, TV loops stream into my closed eyes. In no other world but this, we watch as mother is again and again torn from child, no glyph known for repair. Let's see, I forgot to look at the time. I think I'm good. Now I'm going to turn to poems of my own mother, who is still living but is afflicted with Alzheimer's. And well, in this poem, that's not part of the poem, and in a couple of the others it is. This is called Arthritis. Save your hands, my mother says, seeing me untwist a jar's tight cap, just the way she used to tell me not to let boys fool around or feel my breasts. Keep them fresh for marriage, as if they were actual fruit. I scoffed to think they could bruise, scuff, soften, rot, wither. I look down now at my knuckly thumbs, my index finger permanently askew in the same classic crook as hers, called a swan's neck, as if snapped, it's that pronounced. Even as I type, wondering how long I'll be able to, each joint in my left finger needing to be hoisted, prodded into place, one knuckle like a clock style clicking as it's turned to open, bend or unbend. I balk at the idea that we can overuse ourselves, must parcel out and pace our energies so as not to run out of any necessary component while still alive. The definition of necessary, necessarily suffering change over time. The only certainty is uncertainty. I thought I knew, so ignored whatever she said about boys and sex. Her version of a story, never mine. It made me laugh, the way she made up traditions, that we didn't kiss boys until a certain age. We didn't fool around. What we? What part of me was she? No part I could put my finger on. How odd then, one day, to find her half napping in her room, talking first to herself and then to me about a boy she used to know, her friend's brother, who she kissed, she said, just because he wanted her to. Now, why would I do that, she mused, distraught anew, and so freshly stung by the self-betrayal. I reached across the gulf my father left to her side of their bed and stroked my future hand. Let's see. This poem, it's all in italics. It signifies that it's a monologue, and it's in the voice of my mother. At this point, she is afflicted with Alzheimer's. For years, and I guess she still does, she, watches the same shows and movies over and over and doesn't, remember them. Anyway, which figures into the poem a little bit. My mother tells me how it works. I've seen this one before, just not through to the end. Are you getting my messages? Here's where, ordering an apple by the kitchen window, he figures out the truth, pockets the knife, and runs. Who pressed pause? Put it back on. I never thought it would come to this, a neighborhood of billionaires I can't comprehend. Something's got to give because I said so. You have no idea the things they do to me. S bought off the board, and so they honored her. Mistress of manipulation, that's how it works. He never could admit that's how it works. Is she still there when he comes back for her? I thought I could schedule sadness, boss it around. And this is FaceTime. It makes a kind of cockeyed sense that my mother lingers so robustly long after her mind has left the party. She was an Uber hostess after all, and the caterers, no, the caregivers, haven't gone home. She's forgotten they need to get paid. It's prearranged. A good thing Dad left money. I came late to being a good daughter. As a moral value, it didn't move me. It involved too futile a fealty. What I wanted was safe passage, diplomatic freedom to come and go after the truce and treaty signing. I sought dual citizenship, 2 passports, primary residence in my own city-state. Yet here I am, unsummoned, calling nearly daily these last years, checking in on FaceTime, so that even if we barely talk, we see each other up close from afar, though mostly and more, my mother doesn't look at me at all, her eyes shut or on her own image in the corner of her screen, trembling. I think I'll just read 2 more poems, short poems. This first one is Scavengers. Let me just this way. Sorry. Here we are. Scavengers. One by one, 6 or 7 ravens settle on the polished rim of our front courtyard's bowl-cut stone fountain. They cool their claws in the overflow, pecking at the placid water, a hint of gurgle at its center. From the window, I see them convening, conversing, but can't see why a flock is called an unkindness. To get at that, I'd have to be out among the carrion. When they leave, they lift off in one great rustle snap. And this last poem, which is also the book's last poem, is called Meditation in the Open Air Garage. Leaves have no choice but to articulate the wind. Aspens like zills, a glint and a tilt, the willow, a lone zither. Riffling the cottonwoods at dusk, winds find me cushioned against the concrete in the open air garage, facing the trees, the drive, the road, the mountains up the canyon's other side, until an onrush bellows a mindless, heartless ecstasy through the empty sack of me. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Carol. Your poetry is luminous. It has such clarity and precision, and you just see so much in the real and in the relationships that you have with art, with your husband, with your mother. Your mother poems were just so poignant, and your poems are perfectly balanced, and there's a dignity in your writing that just really is, astonishing. You're just such a fabulous poet. So thank you for your reading. I have one question for you. I think we have time for that. When did you write your first poem?
Well, it's not as simple a question as you think, because I wrote my first, doggerel kind of poem when I was probably, younger than 10. I mean, I was always playing with rhymes and with rhythms, and, none of it, I've seen some of it, none of it's worth looking at again. So does that count? But then I kept doing it. And in high school, I wrote, and I wrote and studied in college. And I'd say, the first poem in my first book, I probably wrote in my late 20s. I mean, I'd written poems before then, but that's the poem. It's called Panoramic Way. I was homesick for Berkeley. That's probably, the poem where I say, well, that's where I began doing what I do now. Yeah. Evolved.
You're a marvelous poet, and I'm so honored.
We're
so honored to have you on the show. It just, it's just really numinous. I mean, what you see in everyday things and in art, and the correspondences that you have are, they just make everything happen. So thank you very much, Carol Moldaw, and I hope I pronounced your name right. Please forgive me if I didn't, but thank you very much, and you're really a blessing with your poetry. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harry. I'm looking forward to hearing you next. I'm going to mute.
Thank you. I'm going to read from my book, East Hollywood, Memorial to Reason, Cahuenga Press, 2015. I am thankful to Phoebe McAdams, James Cushing, and the late Holly Prado, co-founders along with me of Cahuenga Press, and its newest member, Jeanette Clough. This book is dedicated for Holly Prado Northup. Windy blueness. Road rattles along. I should have said tire, wheel. Hidings have happened. Sparks from under the turning. Leaves shoot out, spin, form, circle. Sound of cars moving, constant. Passing fellow walkers always. East Hollywood has its own charm. Armenian, Hispanic, Peruvian, Thai, Filipino, Korean. Walk to 7-Eleven, House of Pies, Skylight Books, Western Post Office, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Bank, Zanku, Las Feliz Theater, and Vista Theater. The road has two golden females, mother and daughter. Market, basket with red slippers moving upward, yellow spiders, many yellow threads, small rhinoceros guards entrance, and flamenco dances radiate fountain, spinning hands elevate wind. It's always windy in East Hollywood. For my friend Aram Saroyan, I've had enough time to think about living in Los Angeles, and the answer is simply yes. Last Thursday, I walked south to Santa Monica Boulevard, turned left past Mexican, Guatemalan, Filipino, Armenian, Moroccan cafes, students waiting for the bus going west. Aram read poems by Archie Manazian, talked about him, his poetry, his relationship with Aram's dad. Walking to the Cahuenga Library reading, I thought, I bet I'm the only person from my little town in Nebraska who will be listening to Armenian writers. Each time I walk in the cool night, it reminds me of when I was young and never played sports. My wife and I have lived in our apartment for 33 and 26 years, respectively. All the tenants are new and young. Baseball, basketball, the city, walk to Skylight Books, House of Pies, Los Feliz, and Vista Theaters, bus to Sunset and Vine, drive to West Hollywood, Silver Spoon, Farmers Market. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't come here to work in the movies, TV, waiter, janitor, cabbie, college, acting. Cars are always driving by on Fountain, Mariposa. The Fountain Theater is right around the corner. 7-Eleven, Jitlada, Walgreens, city buses, Armenian marchers, April 24. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. A man sleeps on a discarded sofa on Fountain. To walk in the city like Alfred Kazin, like Whitman and Crane, Williams, Ginsberg. I read play after play in the public library, 42nd and 5th. I hear Armenian singing, calling, naming, working for a living. In an old library that reminds me of my hometown library, I checked out Clarence Darrow for the defense, joined the Navy, kept the book, the only library book I never returned. I enjoyed the walk to and from the library as much as the poetry. Eternal, vigilant, cool Armenian night. East Hollywood is called Little Armenia. Short love song. The light comes in one window, its drapes pulled back, late afternoon. Holly, I love you. One more moment, heart, glow, soul, sun. You take music silently away. The gray and white female rests on the black chest in shade near window. She looks out, the diagonal light cuts across black chest. My writing hand is in light. You ask the day if it's awake. Her body moves slightly into slant of light. Floor has welt, remains whether you see it. Shaman, heart, God, journey, realizes never is any leaving. Guitar strings, guns hot. A lifetime love will be all right. Home of light and reason, clean, bare, full. Home with wife, love, cat, song, and TV. Primrose, darling. Two white upside down falling. My dad was a shining light who drove the long stretches of blacktop roads in western Nebraska. My dad was a fire on a hill who saw a cross in darkest dark. My dad was golden triangles who sang ships' steering wheels to fan bells. My dad sprang, tied red ribbons around green memories, rolled long papers into pins at ends of lanes. My dad wore baskets and wreaths. A red light zigzag crossed his weary shoulders. My dad was golden leaves, stopped, saluted the raising and lowering of the flag. My dad was just a golden leaf, with many small dogs in the rush of the changing sky. My dad was a black tornado with light blue chandeliers atop. My dad was a golden circle, rings with width at wheat field edges. My dad was a camera and a winding road and an open hand. My dad was a saintly figure, golden as the chandelier's red steps. My dad was a fallen column, yellow candle burning. My dad was the fire of the sunflower petals. Forlorn, furtive. Desolation and hunger, warmth created, no longer, though a man in East Hollywood, furtive and forlorn, though blessed, the loss was youth and work. He sits in an old car on Fountain. He walks down a sandy hill to a corner to transform huddled breath into solace, walking briskly around a lake, giving thanks to the lady. Behind cities, roads, orange fire flowers. Men stand by the edge and count deaths, flowers gone for years. The golden warriors around perimeter. Why religion born? Why the knight's arm has a bracelet, a place to kiss her cheek. Another's gray head bruising because solace has no breath, contains only seeking, age, time. Race disappears, soon solace, no solace, baseball, basketball, allowance for speed. Man waits for light to change, evening in East Hollywood. Night love. The daytime tells me to text, to use a cell phone, to gravitate to the new, the young, the mobile, the external. The nighttime tells me to sit still, to write, to hold my cat, to pet her, to be in quiet, to hear occasional cars go by on Fountain. The nighttime has a holiness that has been all but worn out by sheep herding, by viewing screeners, by listening to stories. Behold quietness, herald stillness. My body contains pain and blood, water and bone. Far from sirens, a long golden stem with yellow flower, mother and child, sleep, arrows, final dawn, no doom. Our arrival has no cause but limit. Refuse to bow down to necessity. Change has success. Banded our arms with constant mobility, mutual competition, our mother's heart gray and lost in money, to reimburse consumption, to connect all beating hearts, to gain privacy by constant interruption, to find the farmer alone in his tractor cab, harvest seed, mine, the furrows with breaking news, death, fire, earthquake, terrorism. A silver crown sits on stillness, nighttime, a quiet time to sit still, hold, and pet my pretty female cat, to wave to my lovely wife as she walks from the bathroom to the bedroom. I love you, cat. I love you, wife. More than cell phones and emails, like light, a quiet and still and constant love. Make a poem. Make a poem from pavement, fragmented and black, uneven, broken. Make a poem from an experience, memory, grief. Make an email a poem. Make a poem from tweets. Write it at intervals over a day. Make a poem from death and hunger. Make a poem out of embracing a fear. Make a poem out of wanting to tell someone something. Make a poem out of fear, vulnerability, poverty of spirit. Make a poem from poems that you've read. Poems come from poems. Read the language school poets as well as the romantic poets. While you struggle with learning the many forms, learn the tradition of poetry, especially the epics. Make a poem from tennis, sweet potatoes, and ruin. Make a poem from beauty and disgrace. Make a poem from bowing down to a greater craftsman. Make a poem out of women and men and trees with jacaranda blossoms fallen on the sidewalk. Make a poem from hills and viaduct and sod houses and country roads and a 2-story red brick schoolhouse. Out of pride and discounted emotions, make a poem at evening. Anniversary. 23 years ago, we got married. Our home in East Hollywood with plenty of fans, 2 cats, 2 TVs, 1 typewriter, 1 iMac, and 1 HP printer. Holly made pasta with pesto and a salad. We eat together every night. She listens to me, loves, and supports me. We participate in the poetry world. We view films at the Academy. A distant car horn honks incessantly. A small theater, many churches, and numerous multi-ethnic restaurants are within walking distance. The horn quit. The fan continues. The car horn resumes honking. It's Sunday evening, Mother's Day. It's our anniversary. I'm glad you chose me, I say. Pool walk. I walked in East Hollywood in cool air of a June night, saw a photo shoot in a skateboard shop on Hollywood Boulevard, saw a young woman with a guitar strapped to her back walking north on Kingsley, saw a cop in an LAPD car in front of 7-Eleven, saw 2 young male runners on Mariposa, a woman jogging west on Sunset, 9 p.m. Thought about Blake writing, quote, I must create a system or be enslaved by another man, end of quote. Heard and then saw a helicopter above, sat on the steps of the Ukrainian Catholic Church on Delancre, saw 3 young Hispanic boys playing with balloons in the Shakey's parking lot, saw a cop driving west on Sunset. To walk at night when it's cool, to sit in our bedroom while my wife sets the alarm. When my wife comes to bed, the female cat makes room for her. Love poem to Holly. When I met her, we met at the hips. The buildings go up. The homeless are still present. One sleeps in an alcove, Sunset and Alexandria, southwest corner. Break in the wind, a golden waist clasp with belts outward each way holds us together. She and our fellow poet ate a kale salad, chicken pot pie for me. The gold crown was like fires all around, steeples even, with wings upward like a giant scarab, and a canoe like a shoe to journey from inner light round it. circumference wall. For whom the bell tolled. It tolled for Warren Miller, neighbor and actor friend. It tolled for Paul Jenkins, Richard Burton's cousin, actor, neighbor. It tolled for the tap dancer Al Maines, who, when he met Fred Astaire, his idol, at the Chalet Gourmet Sunset in Fairfax, and told Astaire that he was a tap dancer. This was 1971. Astaire told him, "Tap is dead. Get yourself a new gimmick." It told for Paul Brooks, who wrote love poems to women as they entered the room. The same moon above me is above you, my friend. In an Eastern prison, toll and tolls, told, make what life you can from death. Two black cats eating from two paper plates in a front yard. For the moon tolls for the sun, for the husband away from his wife tolls. And what does he toll? Word, moon, night, walk. Traffic both ways on Prospect. What do you say to a fellow poet in prison? Practice the Imagist's rules. Quote, 1, direct treatment of the thing, whether subjective or objective. 2, to use absolutely no word that did not contribute to the presentation. 3, as regarding rhythm, to compose in sequence of the musical phrase, not in sequence of a metronome, end of quote. Or tell him to read Wordsworth's The Prelude, or Pound's section about character in the cantos. When I was in my deepest sorrow, I read the poems of St. John of the Cross, later the poems of Rilke, or I read the Bible out loud and to myself. I'm okay as long as I am with someone. Walks in the city give me solace. I was sitting at Starbucks on the northwest corner of Vermont and Prospect last night, and I thought about you. I was eating a cup of caramel ice cream, and I was watching the traffic going north and south on Vermont, the cars and motorcycles going east and west on Hollywood, and I thought about you. I remember seeing you at this Starbucks, and we talked. The solace of the night holds freedom lost. In memoriam. This was written for Wanda Coleman, who was one of the great poets from Los Angeles. She died a few years ago. In memoriam. Today I walk with a nuance. It has its vocation and is of the spirit. Where the muse allows us to go, blesses the spirit, to not bully or order words around, to not interrupt words. Marriage was a waist around her, sheltering, with her fires and flowers blooming, adoration aside, she shelters our journey, beckons, subsides. The quarter moon invites star-shaped sea flowers, mighty mist. What do we have but a road and a sky? The red sash dashes toward the door, and a hand made of red roses sends childhood pictures. The nuance is there is no childhood. It's a mint green flower at the pool's end. For within the opening, I leave the nuance, sit in shadow, face hidden. Lexington and Kenmore, I look up and all the lights in the sky are Wanda's eyes. And this will be the last poem. East Hollywood, as I said, it's called Little Armenian. It goes from Western Boulevard to Hillhurst and from Melrose to Franklin. For my love sleeping, what do I see but the pressures beating down? From all directions on the blue stone, with bright spots like burning coals. What do I see but headdresses and peacocks' spread tails and enormous rain? A sword as place, a lightning point. What do I hear but flowers blooming, like tails reaching upward, like lights as bracelets forming a bridge on water's surface? What do I believe but a flower in the moon, a shadow blocking its width in front of the sun? To say who's right would be to recognize a sunflower fronting my face close as a lion's open mouth. To welcome would be to listen, to focus within the blue sky cycle, to turn within its circle, to remember missing the answer that followed reason's logic, to count stands in the middle, to find means to rescue, stay within and not hide, to not escape means forever, to hand over above hands, reaching from the fire. The vase of flowers and clouds in the sky remain lonely daffodils. Remembrance offers concision, the center of the propeller. Within stillness, desire surrenders. What desire has no fruit? What silence ignores hunger? What red flowers transform dusk to death with twin yellow brightness? Glowed dusk with white doves in trees. Thank you very much. Carol, why don't you come on and we'll talk a few more minutes. We have a few more minutes if you would like to. If you're still...
Yes, I would like to. Here I am.
Yeah.
I just want to say it was, I've so enjoyed hearing your poems today. I love the love poems are beautiful, and I got such a sense of East Hollywood. That was kind of wonderful, like being in a new landscape. And I was very moved by your poem to Wanda and to the imprisoned poet. Both of those are really everything. The poem to your father was marvelous. So I just want to thank you. It was my, I'd love to hear Marcia another time, but it's my good fortune to hear you today.
Well, it's mutual. And, may I ask you a question? You're also a teacher, and, Santa Fe, a fellow poet of mine lives in Santa Fe. His name is John Fines. And he was in that, I forget what you call it, the gloom, that
Zozobra?
Yeah, he was one of the people who worked in that, and he's lived there about 10 years, but I just wanted to bring up his name to you. And there's a woman here who lived in Santa Fe for 10 years. Her name is Melody Sherwood, and both of them have told me how much they love Santa Fe. But that's not my question. My question is, obviously, I heard your poetry. And I wanted to ask you another question. When we were first talking at the end of your reading, what would you say to a young woman who's sitting down to write her first poem? What would you tell her to focus on? Would it be an image, an emotion, an idea? What would you tell her?
Well, I think that, that's different for everybody, an image, emotion, idea. But I would probably say a few things. One is to read women poets as well as men poets, not, because usually when we begin to read, it's, you're overwhelmed with the incredible male poets, but there are incredible women too. Another thing would be to really write what is meaningful to you and not think, oh, this subject isn't fit for poetry, or I haven't read anything about this. So I would say to listen to that inner self, and whether it's an image that comes or an emotion that needs to be expressed. And the third thing I would say, and really I'd say this to any young poet, is to be patient and to be kind to yourself, to be more of a good friend to yourself than a critical parent, and to keep at it.
I like that. And follow-up question, maybe you answered it in that answer right there, but when you sit down to write, what is it that kicks off your poem? Is it an image, an idea, words, phrases, or what is it that kicks your poem off?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I find it's different for different poems. Sometimes it's an image. Sometimes it's a line that comes to me out of nowhere that just, stays with me, that I want to find the poem it belongs in, so to speak. Sometimes I have an experience that's, moving. I have a poem called The Butterfly that's about a butterfly landing on my hand and staying there for quite a while. And that was just such a amazing experience. I always wanted to write about it. And it took me a number of years to sort of find the right language or rhythm, everything for that poem. But, so it was kind of an imagistic experience that I wanted to describe. So it really varies. And I find some poems come much more easily than other poems. Some poems you have in mind and it takes a lot to kind of find them. I'm sure you know those things. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're such an articulate, and you see so much. You're visionary within the real world. You see so much. You see the intangible as much as the tangible. So thank you for a numinous reading. Carol Moldaw from Santa Fe, a blessing.
Thank you all. Yeah.